Chapter 1. Hot Nights. Screams, high-pitched, terror-filled screams, echoed down a dark tunnel, stirring ZostaMax, who stood from the boulder he sat upon inside the tunnel's depths. Taking his spear from where it leaned on the rocky wall behind him, he ran blindly through the unlit tunnel toward the light at the end. In the dark, his bare feet thudded unafraid upon the naked rock as it sloped gently upward, a path worn smooth from centuries of feet like his. The air grew warmer near the tunnel's mouth. Not a good sign. This late in the year, it shouldn't still be this warm so late at night. ZostaMax pushed through those thoughts from his head. He didn't need the weather distracting him from whatever horrors awaited. He paused at the end of the tunnel to ready himself, sacrificing a second to suck a deep breath into his broad, tanned chest. Then the screams came again, weaker, more strained this time. ZostaMax got poked in the eyes as he stepped out of the mouth of the dark tunnel. His eyes had adjusted to the blackness inside and worked painfully hard to readjust to the firelight. He saw only shapes and silhouettes at first, dark pinpoints against the wall of orange light. He identified the problem by the noise before his eyesight adjusted. The shrieking stopped, and the roaring began. The other two watchmen from the shift had remained outside, weapons already at hand. A shorter man, a fire builder, named Ibenex, with his tinderbox still under one arm, led two scouts toward the safety of the tunnel, waving the lanky women into the safety of the tunnel. A Balaur commanded ZostaMax's attention. Balauri were big, mean, cold-blooded semi-bipedal lizards with wings. They varied in size, colors, and patterns. They were smart enough to make plans, work together, and make probing attacks. When there was one, there was always more. The reptilian beasts never traveled alone. They flew and hunted in packs. ZostaMax only saw the one, and that unsettled him even more. It was a blood-red monstrosity with black stripes starting at its snout that trailed over its head and spiny body to the tip of its tail. The bright firelight shone blood spatter over the ruby scales. A shimmering mist smeared against the reptile's dull red. The Balaur had gotten a hold of one of the scouts, a severed arm clamped in its jaws and the torso pinned beneath its body. ZostaMax made eye contact with the fiend. He measured only about 30 paces of sandstone keeping between them. Its eyes had a hateful look, as if the creature was trying to rip out his soul with its slotted pupils. The Balaur's jaw slackened, and the shredded appendage fell to the ground. Its attention diverted from the fallen victim to the ones it wanted to maul next. The other two watchmen backed towards the tunnel entrance, standing shoulder to shoulder with ZostaMax as the fire builder made it inside with the two surviving scouts, huddled in the darkness, just deep enough to hide in the tunnel's shadows. The three lean, long-haired men, with skin tanned to a golden mahogany by the sun, set their jaws and planted their heels in the entrance. The reptile growled and slowly crept forward, keeping its head low, its jaw nearly scraping the ground. Its scaly red neck coiled like a snake, snugging its head up against its shoulders before unfurling its wings. The leathery membrane cast a dark shadow that oozed over the rock. The firelight behind the Balaur made its wings glow. The light filtered through the crimson skin, showing the walls on either side of the tunnel opening with blood light. ZostaMax didn't turn to look, not daring to remove his eyes from the reptile. Instead, he relied on his ears, listening to the scouts' footsteps as they fled, scampering deeper into the tunnel. At the end of the maze-like warren, resting on top of the excavation, was a solid metal fortress known as Lingrad, a fortress called down from the sky by the ancestors to protect humanity from these savage animals and their ilk. It now lay, half buried by the sands of time. The fire builder didn't leave with the scouts, instead producing a finely crafted, deeply curved knife, holding his ground behind the other three. ZostaMax held his trusty spear, and his fellow watchmen both held axes. The group of men stood bare-chested, jaws set as the Balor loomed. Standing resolute, they were the only thing standing between the cold-blooded monster and the dark, twisting recesses of Lingrad's bowels. Descending from above, drifting out of the gloom into the circle of firelight, two more reptiles alighted upon the stones, the wind whispering under their wings as they landed. They didn't crawl like the red one. They looked older, prouder, standing upright on their hind legs, tucking their wings neatly behind themselves while holding their smaller forelimbs up against their thick barrel chests. Both were a soft green color like delicate, fresh foliage, with broad, flat scales on their bellies that were gray like sun-bleached wood. They differed from each other in the pattern of the tan freckles that spangled them. Their brows furrowed as they strutted closer. They stood head and shoulders above the tallest of the men, appearing composed and dignified, almost civilized. ZostaMax had never been in such proximity to the Balor before. They appeared coherent and intelligent, not animals like their smaller red counterpart. The pair came forward, flanking the other. With heads bowed, each dropped to a knee beside the red one. They had to lean forward as they reached with their short forelimbs, resting a three-fingered hand on each of the red Balor's shoulders. The red menace drooped, setting its chin on the stone, upper lip no longer vibrating with rage. Its horizontal pupils narrowed, pulling into focus again. The flare in its nostrils shrank and its wings flopped to the ground, their grotesque shadows disappearing as they deflated, looking lean and desperate. The green Balauri led it away. It stayed on all fours, head low, tail dragging across the stones as it gently repacked its wings, rolling and folding them to fit atop its back. The Balauri shuffled past the fire and stood on the far side of the dancing flames. The red one stayed on all fours, looking from one to the other of its escorts. Expressions on its inhuman face changing, its thick, scaly hide struggling and contorting with multiple emotions, perhaps shame or embarrassment. ZostaMax watched intensely now that his eyes had adjusted to the light. The Balor looked back with longing and hunger at the four men who stood blocking the opening of the tunnel with weapons still in hand. Restless hisses and rumbles from the green pair, along with fidgety rolls of their shoulders and snaps of their jaws that made audible claps, pulled the red one's gaze away. The watchmen stood resolute, guarding the tunnel entrance as the animals deliberated. They watched, sweating nervously, one of the Balauri stamping a foot and growling, while the other gave a low, guttural hiss. They could feel some of the low-frequency conversation through the stones with their bare feet. The man to ZostaMax's left leaned in and whispered through the side of his mouth, "We should attack while they're distracted, doing whatever it is they're doing." ZostaMax, with brow furrowed, shook his head without taking his eyes off the scaly beasts. He didn't speak, afraid to attract their adversary's attention. He couldn't be sure if these two green ones would lead the slender red one away, or if they were coming to help it. Balauri would commonly make false probing attacks. With so many massive winged beasts on their doorstep, no one was comfortable. One human had already found a violent end this night. The man on his left continued, "Why not? They killed her. Is it not our duty to defend our people? To avenge her? They're distracted with each other, and who knows what they're doing? They could be planning anything. Might come back and eat the rest of us, too. We should attack now while they aren't paying attention, and we still have the limbs on our bodies." The other watchman, on his right, said what ZostaMax was thinking. "There's 3 of them and 3 of us. They're bigger and stronger than any human. They have pointy bits on more ends than we do. Here, their advantage is diminished because of the tunnel. We can fight them here. But with them out there, we would have to cover all that open ground. Without the cover of the shadows, we'd be in the firelight, we wouldn't have the element of surprise, and our small soft bodies would be at a disadvantage without the limbs attached to them. He trailed off as the first man interrupted. Here they come. Get ready. This is it. One of the giant green beasts had stayed on the far side of the fire, stretching its neck, looking even more massive as it inflated itself. The other green one led the now defeated-looking red one back towards the men with a clawed forepaw on its shoulder. ZostaMax spoke. Don't start something we can't finish. They vastly outweigh us, despite our equality of numbers. If it was just the red one, then I would have us hack it to bits. Not with these other ones here. They know what they're doing. I don't know what they intended, but they prevented more bloodshed. I'm not sure if they mean to cause more violence or not. Let's not provoke them. Maybe we'll live another night. These ones seem reasonable. The man on the left's eyes bulged. Reasonable? The pair stopped no closer than the red one had come to the tunnel entrance earlier. A long moment of silence let the tension creep to a palpable level. Dragging on, only interrupted by the fire crackling in the night, its flickering light pushing the monster shadows this way and that. Undulating and twisting inky phantoms of Balauri smeared on the rocks around the tunnel entrance. The second watchman shouted to the creatures, as if yelling would make his words more understandable. What now, you filthy lizards? Both men and Balauri winced at the broken silence. The Balauri's heads recoiled on their long necks. The green one stamped a foot. The red one, still on all fours, sighed, making a long, deep, hollow noise, revealing how massive and powerful the creature's lungs were. After a sharp inhale to refill its lungs, it made a single, low noise, almost a whine, sorrowful and depressed. The noise drug on for several seconds as it held the whimper while making sustained eye contact with each of the watchmen. It took all of ZostaMax's will not to look away from the narrow, slitted pupils in its amber eyes. The green one closed its eyes, the armored eyelids making an audible snap as it drooped its head. It straightened while the smaller red one turned. The men watched them walk past the fire. After a short running start, galloping on all fours, each hopped, and the three took off in rapid succession. The powerful beat of their wings churned the flames around and made the air waft back into the opening of the tunnel. The gust carried the stench of fire and blood. Powerful strokes carried them up, out of the fire circle of light, and far enough away that the sound of their wings stirred the air was inaudible, carrying them away into the night as if they had never existed. The other watchmen rushed back into the light around the fire pit. Their axes at the ready, the fire builder lunged out of the tunnel's mouth, past the watchman, and crossed the space to the fallen scout, sheathing his curved knife along the way. ZostaMax approached the scene gingerly, following the fire builder, now recognizing the hairy shoulders as belonging to Ibanez. ZostaMax didn't get too close to the mess, not daring to step in the woman's blood. That felt too personal, too intimate. He didn't even know her name. It didn't feel right to walk in her blood. He kept his distance. Ibanez had no problems about it, going through the puddle and straight to her side. He knelt and lifted her torso into his lap. Even without her arms, and with so little blood left, she still clung to life. The woman's resilience impressed ZostaMax. She spoke, whispering, while Ibanez held her and cried. After a few words, she gave up. She passed, the last breath like a breeze through the curtains of her lips. ZostaMax wasn't sure if she had formed words or only made incoherent, shock-stricken mumblings. Ibanez stayed with her and wept. ZostaMax left, leaving Ibanez cradling the body. The scout was beyond his help, beyond anyone's help. ZostaMax felt awkward standing around, doing nothing next to the sadness of his comrade. He went back down the tunnel, into Leningrad, to get the healers or the shaman or whoever to take care of that mess out there. He had been awake for far too long. Exhaustion caught up to him as his adrenaline wore off. All he wanted was to go back to his bunk amidst the warren inside the fortress and sleep. ZostaMax spent a long time searching before he found anyone still awake. It was the darkest hours of the night, the quiet time before the sunrise when the planet itself slept. There was no noise, no people about, no activity at all. ZostaMax eventually found Thulvox, though that wasn't who he had wanted to find, but he was certainly the authority figure to take charge of the situation. Thulvox was the captain of the Watchmen. He wasn't as tall as most, just shoulder high to ZostaMax, but his shoulders were broad, his chest deep, his arms massive. He was one of the strongest men this ancient place had ever known. His broad form bared the hallway, a lit torch in one hand, coloring the ceiling with another layer of soot from its oily smoke and a crude club, fashioned from the femur of a Balauri, in the other. He growled deeply at ZostaMax, making no attempt to hide his distaste for the younger man.
I heard from a couple of scouts that you led a Balaur into the fire pit. That the monster would have gotten in and killed everyone if it wasn't for Ibanex. He's not even a watchman. He's just a fire builder. Yet he did your job.
ZostaMax knew he couldn't explain himself to this man, who had already decided on his worth long ago. ZostaMax had found many times in the past that once Thulvox made up his mind, there was no room for further interpretation. Thulvox could never be wrong. He was the resident and most mighty Balaur slayer. ZostaMax knew it wasn't worth his time or effort to get the story straight with his superior. Instead, he told Thulvox a half-truth, closer to what he expected to hear, just to get to the other side of the conversation faster, choosing the short, painful route over the long, arduous one.
The Balauri left. Ibanex is out there with the scout who got mauled. She gave in to her injuries after the Balauri left. 2 others are still on guard out there. They'll see the night through until the sunrise brings the heat again. It doesn't surprise me that Ibanex would be able to drive the beasts off. He is the oldest son of one of our greatest leaders. I shall fetch his mother. Zastava will know what to do. Now you are useless. Get out of my sight.
He pointed with the head of his bone club, his words dripping with vehemence. ZostaMax departed for his bunk, glad to be away from the belligerent leader, wondering why Thulvox had pointed out who Ibanex's mother was. ZostaMax was well aware of the political and familial ties his only friend had. Due to the community's general distaste for ZostaMax, they didn't let him stay in the chambers that served as the barracks for all of the other watchmen, leaving him to bunk with the hopefuls, the younger boys who wanted to be watchmen, just as he had once been. These kids had the heart, but they weren't big or strong enough to fight Balauri yet. Most of them hero-worshipped Thulvox, and because of the commander's open aversion for ZostaMax, they too gave him a wide berth, buttressed with suspicion. He slipped in through the open door, past the sleeping boys, some hardly old enough to be away from their mothers. Not that they all still had mothers. He slunk back into his corner, past the hopefuls. ZostaMax feared that sleep wouldn't come. He sat on his cot, thinking of the Balauri, and the noises they had made. Were they speaking to each other? Had they come back for a final word before leaving? ZostaMax's mind was too stirred up to let his body sleep. He kept wandering. He pondered the place where he lived, this metallic city of Leningrad and its many winding tunnels. Even if the shaman said they were hallways, they were still tunnels to him. He despised it sometimes. He never fit in, never belonged, even if it was the only place he had ever known. Despite his punctuality, his dignified service, his honesty, and his persistent consistency, the community still shunned him. He could never be good enough for them, and he took that personally. Politics weren't as black and white as fighting reptiles and were a battle he'd rather not fight. He had survived the encounter for this day. He pushed the thoughts aside and finally laid down. The aches and stiffness caught up with him, and soon he succumbed to sleep, struggling with mixed results to keep the night's gore out of his slumber.